At my daughter's wedding, 20 minutes before the ceremony, I heard her groom laughing behind a closed door at the end of the hall. That girl is clueless. Her father's worth millions, and she thinks I proposed because of her personality. My blood went cold, but my hands were steady, because I'd been waiting for this moment for 6 weeks. Before I tell you what happened next, how a man who spent 36 years selling lumber and roofing nails in rural Georgia used a church hallway recording to bring down a professional con artist in front of 200 guests, I want to offer a gentle reminder. Some elements of this story have been dramatized for narrative and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people or places is coincidental, but the warning at the heart of this story is real. Betrayal doesn't always knock on your door. Sometimes you walk it down the aisle yourself and hand it a ring. And before we go further, take a second and tell me in the comments what city or country you're watching from. It helps this channel reach more people, and it reminds me that even in the ugliest chapters, we're never really telling these stories alone. My name is Warren Jessup. I'm 59 years old. I own Jessup Building Supply, 4 locations across Middle Georgia, a lumber yard outside Macon, and a handful of commercial properties I've picked up over the decades when other men were losing their nerve. I'm not a flashy man. I drive a 10-year-old truck. I eat lunch at the same diner every Tuesday. I wear boots to board meetings, and I've never once apologized for it. My wife, Annette, died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The kind that gives you just enough time to understand what you're losing and not nearly enough time to say what needs to be said. She left behind me and our daughter, Celia. Celia was 19 when her mother died. She's 25 now, and until 6 weeks before her wedding day, I thought I'd done a decent job raising her on my own. Annette had a phrase she used when something didn't sit right. She'd be folding laundry or reading the paper, and she'd stop mid-motion and say, "That dog won't hunt, Warren." It meant the math didn't add up. The story had a hole. The person smiling at you was smiling for the wrong reasons. I started hearing Annette's voice in my head about 4 months into Celia's relationship with a man named Garrett Voss. Garrett was 31, said he worked in financial consulting, had a degree from somewhere in the Carolinas he never quite pinned down. He wore slim suits to Sunday dinners. He brought wine I couldn't pronounce. He shook my hand with both of his, which is something I've never trusted in a man. 1 hand is a greeting, 2 hands is a sales pitch. But Celia was happy. And after watching her grieve her mother with a silence that frightened me more than tears ever could, I would have let the devil himself sit at my table if it made her laugh again. So I held my tongue until 6 weeks before the wedding, when Annette's voice came back so loud I couldn't ignore it. It started with small things. Garrett asking about the trust fund Annette and I had set up for Celia, not casually, but specifically, how much was in it, when she could access the principal, whether the trustee could be changed. He framed every question inside concern. "I just want to make sure we're set up right for the future, sir, but I've been in business since I was 23 years old. I know what it sounds like when someone's measuring a room before they rob it." Then I found something I wasn't supposed to find. Celia had left her laptop open at my kitchen table after Sunday dinner. I wasn't snooping. I was clearing dishes. But the screen showed an email from Garrett to an address I didn't recognize. The subject line said, "Timeline update." The preview text showed 1 sentence before the screen dimmed. She agreed to add me after the honeymoon. Should be full access by August. I stared at those words for 10 seconds. Then I set down the plates, walked to my office, and called a man named Dale Honeycutt. Dale is a private investigator out of Atlanta, Retired GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, built like a filing cabinet and twice as thorough. I'd hired him years ago when a supplier was shorting my deliveries. Dale found the guy's second warehouse in 4 days. I trusted him the way I trust a tape measure. No opinions, just facts. "Dale," I said, "I need you to open up a man named Garrett Voss. Everything. Employment, finances, criminal history, prior relationships. I want to know where he sleeps, what he owes, and who he's lied to." Dale didn't ask why. He asked how to spell the last name. What Dale found over the next 5 weeks changed everything. Garrett Voss wasn't a financial consultant. He'd held the title briefly at a firm in Charlotte that fired him for mishandling client funds. Before that, he'd been let go from an investment group in Richmond for the same reason. His degree was from an online program he'd never completed. But that wasn't the worst of it. Garrett had been engaged twice before, once to a woman named Adrienne Langford in Roanoke, Virginia. Her father was a retired Marine who ran a chain of tire shops. Adrienne's father had run a background check early, 3 months into the relationship, and confronted Garrett. Garrett vanished overnight. The second engagement was to a woman named Tracy Bowen outside Portland, Oregon. Tracy's family owned a logging operation. The engagement lasted 8 months before Tracy's sister found evidence that Garrett had been siphoning money from a joint account they'd opened. Tracy called it off. Garrett disappeared again. Both times the pattern was identical. Target a woman with family wealth. Charm the father. Get close to the money. Extract what you can and vanish. And now he was sitting at my dinner table, calling me sir and asking about my trust fund. Dale found one more thing. Garrett owed money, serious money, to a man connected to a gambling operation out of South Florida. The amount was somewhere north of $500,000, and the people he owed it to weren't the kind who sent letters. I sat in my office with Dale's report spread across my desk like a map of a minefield. Photographs, financial records, court filings from the Charlotte termination, statements from Adrienne Langford's father that he'd provided willingly once Dale explained the situation. I had everything I needed to stop this wedding. One phone call to Celia, and it would be over. But I didn't make that call. Not yet. Because I'd learned something in 36 years of business that most people never figure out. Knowing the truth and proving the truth are two different things, and if I went to Celia with accusations and paperwork, Garrett would do what he'd done twice before. Deny everything, paint me as a controlling father, and either manipulate Celia into choosing him over me, or simply disappear and resurface with another family in another state. I needed him to prove it himself, in a room full of witnesses, with nowhere to run. So I started building. First I called Adrienne Langford's father. His name was Colonel Martin Langford, retired, and he answered the phone the way military men do. Surname, then silence. "Colonel, my name is Warren Jessup. I'm calling about a man named Garrett Voss." The silence on the other end changed texture, thickened. When he spoke, his voice was made of rust and restraint. "He's doing it again," the colonel said. It wasn't a question. "He's engaged to my daughter. Wedding's in 5 weeks. How far in is he?" Deep enough to be asking about trust funds. The colonel exhaled. "What do you need from me?" "I need you in a room," I said, "at the right moment, with your daughter if she's willing." "When and where?" the colonel said. Next I called Tracy Bowen's family in Oregon. Tracy's older sister, Denise, answered. When I explained who I was and why I was calling, she went quiet for a full 30 seconds. Then she said, "We'll be there. Just tell us when to fly." I wasn't building a legal case, not yet. I was building an audience, a room full of people who knew exactly what Garrett Voss was, positioned to witness the moment he couldn't deny it anymore. Over the next 5 weeks, I played the part of the oblivious father. I approved the venue, a restored chapel outside Macon with a reception hall attached, the kind of place Annette would have chosen. I wrote the deposit checks. I smiled at Garrett across the dinner table. I let him call me sir and shake my hand with both of his, and every time I thought of Annette's voice. "That dog won't hunt, Warren." Dale continued surveillance. 2 weeks before the wedding, he documented Garrett meeting with a woman in Atlanta. Not romantic, transactional. She turned out to be a paralegal who, for a fee, prepared documents that looked legal but carried no authority. Garrett was having papers drawn up, power of attorney forms, account access authorizations, trust modification requests, all designed to be slid across a table to Celia during the honeymoon when she'd be relaxed, trusting, and far from anyone who might advise her otherwise. Dale photographed everything: the meeting, the documents, the payment. Every piece went into the folder. 1 week before the wedding, I met with the Macon County District Attorney's Office, not to file charges, not yet, but to brief them. I brought Dale's full report. I brought statements from the Langford and Bowen families. I brought the financial records showing Garrett's debts and his pattern of fraud. The assistant DA, a woman named Carolyn Fry, listened without interruption for 45 minutes. When I finished, she closed the folder and looked at me. "You could stop this now," she said. "Show your daughter the evidence and cancel the wedding." "I could," I said, and he'd run, just like he ran from Virginia, just like he ran from Oregon, and 6 months from now, some other father would be sitting where I'm sitting. She studied me. "What are you proposing?" I told her. She listened. She didn't say yes immediately, but she didn't say no. When I left, she said she'd have investigators present at the venue, plain clothes, positioned and ready. The morning of the wedding arrived like any other October morning in Georgia. Cool, bright, the kind of light that makes everything look honest. I drove to the chapel early, told Celia I wanted to check the arrangements, walked the grounds, shook hands with the caterer, complimented the florist. Then I walked down the hallway toward the groomsman's room, the way I'd planned to for 6 weeks, not hoping to hear something, knowing I would. The door was almost closed, almost. 4 inches of gap, enough. Garrett's voice carried like a man who'd never once worried about being overheard. "She's completely in the dark. After the honeymoon, I'll get her to sign the access papers. Her old man's sitting on millions. The supply chain, the properties, the lumber yard, she'll do whatever I tell her. She thinks I'm the best thing that ever happened to her." Laughter. 2 voices I recognized. His groomsmen, Kyle and Declan. "And the old man?" Kyle asked. "Warren?" Garrett snorted. "He's so grateful someone's making his daughter smile again, he'd hand me the keys to the vault himself. Lost his wife a few years back. He's running on sentiment. Men like that are easy." I stood against the wall and pressed record on my phone. Not because I needed more evidence. I had a folder 3 inches thick sitting in the trunk of my truck. I recorded it because I wanted Garrett's voice, his real voice, the one he used when he thought no one who mattered was listening, captured in the same building where my daughter was about to put on her mother's earrings and walk down an aisle. The recording ran for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. He talked about the debts. He talked about Celia like she was a transaction. He talked about disappearing afterward. Maybe Texas, maybe Arizona. Lots of money out there. And then he said something that made my vision narrow to a single point of light. "If she starts asking questions," Kyle said. "What then?" Garrett paused. When he spoke, his voice was flat and practiced. "Honeymoons are complicated. Things happen. Hiking accidents. Bad roads. You never know. I stopped recording, slid the phone into my pocket, walked back down the hallway with my heartbeat in my ears and my wife's voice in my head, steady as a plumb line. That dog won't hunt, Warren. And this time, it won't run either. I climbed the stairs to the bridal suite, knocked twice. Celia opened the door herself. She was wearing the dress, cathedral lace, her mother's pearl earrings, a face so radiant with joy that what I had to do next felt like a kind of violence. "Daddy," she said, spinning once, "Mom would have loved this, right?" I stepped inside, closed the door behind me. The bridesmaids looked up from their champagne. "Ladies, could you give us the room? I need a moment with my daughter." They filed out without protest. Something in my expression shut down every question before it formed. Celia's smile faltered. "Dad, what is it?" I sat her down, took both her hands, and I told her. Not with the recording? Not yet. I told her with the words first. About Dale, about the investigation, about Adrian Langford in Virginia and Tracy Bowen in Oregon, about the gambling debts, about the paralegal in Atlanta and the power of attorney documents sitting in Garrett's luggage right now, waiting for the honeymoon. Her face went through seasons, spring to winter in 60 seconds, confusion, denial, the desperate, grasping search for an explanation that didn't exist, and then collapse. Not loud, not dramatic, just the quiet implosion of a woman realizing that the man she loved was a character in a script she'd never been shown. "No," she whispered. "No, Dad." He cried when he proposed. He cried. "I know, sweetheart." I held her hands tighter. "He's very good at what he does." She looked at me with Annette's eyes, the same brown, the same depth, the same stubborn fire underneath the grief. "How long have you known?" 6 weeks? 6 weeks? Her voice cracked. "You let me plan a wedding for 6 weeks knowing—" "I had to," I said. "If I'd told you the day I found out, he would have run. He would have vanished and done this to someone else's daughter. I needed time to build something he couldn't escape." She stared at me. "Build what?" I told her the rest. The DA's office, the investigators in the building, Colonel Langford and his daughter, who were sitting in the back pew right now, waiting, Tracy Bowen's sister Denise, who'd flown in from Portland and was in the reception hall. Celia's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "They're here? The other families?" "They wanted to be," I said, "for the same reason I'm standing here, because this ends today. Have you ever seen a family turn their back on someone like this? Have you ever watched trust dissolve in real time, not because of a stranger, but because of the person you chose to build a life with? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment. Tell me if you've been there." Celia sat very still for a long time. The chapel organ started up below us, the prelude, the signal for guests to settle. Through the window I could see people finding their seats, programs in hand, smiling. Then she said something I'll carry with me until I'm in the ground beside Annette. "I'm not canceling this wedding, Dad." I blinked. She looked up at me. Her makeup was streaked. Her hands were shaking. But her voice was iron. "I'm walking down that aisle. He's going to stand there and watch me come toward him, and he's going to believe he won. And then you're going to show every person in that room what he really is." "Celia?" "No." She stood up, wiped her face with the back of her hand, walked to the mirror. "I was willing to stand up there and promise him my life, Dad. The least I can do is stand up there and take it back." I watched my daughter fix her makeup with hands that trembled but never stopped. I watched her straighten the dress, adjust Annette's earrings, and look at herself in the mirror with an expression I'd only seen once before, on Annette's face, the morning she told me the diagnosis and then got dressed for work anyway. I stood up and offered her my arm. The organ shifted into the processional. The chapel doors opened. 200 faces turned toward us. October light streamed through the stained glass and laid colored shadows across the white runner. We walked. Celia's hand gripped my arm. Her face was serene, a gentle smile, soft eyes. Not a single person in those pews saw anything but a radiant bride and her devoted father. I saw Garrett at the altar, charcoal suit, practiced smile, eyes glistening with manufactured emotion. He watched Celia approach with the face of a man who believed every lie he'd ever told. I saw Colonel Langford in the back row, silver-haired and rigid, his daughter Adrienne beside him. I saw Denise Bowen across the aisle, hands folded, jaw set. I saw two men in plain clothes near the side exits who weren't holding programs and weren't smiling. "Who gives this woman to be married?" Pastor Holcomb asked. I looked at Garrett, held his eyes for one beat longer than a proud father should. "Before I answer that," I said, my voice carrying across the silent chapel, "I'd like to say something to the congregation." Murmurs, confused look. Pastor Holcomb tilted his head. Garrett's smile held, but something behind his eyes shifted, the first flicker of an animal sensing a change in the wind. "Most of you know me," I said. "You know I'm not a man for speeches. My wife Annette was the one with the words. I'm the one who builds things. So I'll keep this short and let the evidence speak for itself." I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. I'd connected it to the chapel's speaker system an hour earlier, a favor from the sound technician, a man named Earl, who'd wired every building I'd ever owned. 6 weeks ago," I said, "I hired an investigator because something about the man standing beside my daughter didn't sit right. What he found is in a folder I've already given to the Macon County District Attorney's office. But this morning, 20 minutes ago, I stood in the hallway outside the groomsman's room and recorded this." I pressed play. Garrett's voice filled the chapel, loud, clear, unmistakable. "She's completely in the dark. After the honeymoon, I'll get her to sign the access papers. Her old man sitting on millions." The chapel went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has physical weight. I watched faces change in real time. Confusion becoming comprehension. Smiles falling like leaves. "Warren? He's so grateful someone's making his daughter smile again, he'd hand me the keys to the vault himself." Garrett's face drained of color. His mouth opened. His hands dropped to his sides. He took one step backward, then stopped, because there was nowhere to go. Honeymoons are complicated. Things happen. Hiking accidents, bad roads. A woman in the third row gasped. A man near the back stood up. The silence broke into murmurs that built into a low, horrified roar. I stopped the recording. Garrett stared at me. His jaw worked. No sound came out. "That's your voice," I said, "recorded 20 minutes ago in this building. And the man behind you in the last pew is Colonel Martin Langford from Roanoke, Virginia. His daughter, Adrienne, was your first target. The woman across the aisle is Denise Bowen from Portland, Oregon. Her sister Tracy was your second." Heads turned. Langford stood, Adrienne beside him. Denise rose on the other side of the chapel. 3 families, 3 states, 1 man. Garrett's head swiveled between them. The practiced charm crumbled like wet paper. His groomsmen, Kyle and Declan, were already moving toward the side door. One of the plainclothes investigators stepped into their path and quietly said, "Gentlemen, stay where you are." "This," Garrett's voice came out strangled, "this isn't, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You owe over $500,000 to people who break bones for a living. You've targeted 3 families across 3 states. You planned to steal from my daughter, and you talked about hurting her if she asked questions. I have 6 weeks of evidence, 2 prior victims willing to testify, and there are investigators from the district attorney's office in this room right now." I let that settle. You're not marrying my daughter today, Garrett. You're not running, and you're not doing this to anyone else's family. Ever. Celia stepped forward then. She'd been silent through all of it, standing at the altar in her mother's earrings, her face wet but her spine straight. She pulled the ring from her finger, the ring he'd bought with money he didn't have, a prop in a play he'd been performing for 2 years, and set it on the altar railing with a click that echoed through the chapel like a gunshot. "I want you to know something," she said to Garrett, her voice low but carrying. "Every dinner, every holiday, every time you told me you loved me, I'm going to use those memories as fuel, not for grief, for steel. You made me harder than I was, and I will never be this foolish again." She turned to me, took my arm, and we walked back down the aisle together. The same aisle, the same light, but everything had changed. People reached out as we passed, hands on shoulders, whispered words I couldn't quite hear. Someone was crying. Someone started clapping. By the time we reached the doors, the entire chapel was on its feet. Behind us, the investigators moved toward Garrett. I didn't watch. I didn't need to. Outside, the October air hit us like cold water. Celia stopped at the bottom of the steps, turned her face to the sky, and breathed. One long, shuddering breath that seemed to empty her completely and fill her back up with something new. "Is it over?" she asked. "The wedding is," I said. "The rest is just beginning." She looked at me with wet eyes and the ghost of a smile. "Mom would have loved that. Your mother," I said quietly, "is the reason I heard her voice 6 weeks ago telling me something was wrong. She never left us, Celia. She just changed how she talks." Celia leaned into me. I held her the way I'd held her when she was small, when she fell, when the world was cruel, when her mother's hospital room went quiet and neither of us knew how to leave. The DA's office moved fast. Garrett was arrested at the chapel that afternoon on charges of fraud and conspiracy. The recording, combined with Dale's investigation and the testimony of the Langford and Bowen families, built a case that left no room for negotiation. Kyle cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. Declan did not, and was charged as an accessory. 4 months later, Garrett Voss was sentenced in a Macon County courtroom to 7 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. During sentencing, Adrian Langford read a victim impact statement that made the courtroom go quiet. Tracy Bowen sent a letter that was read into the record. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood and said 6 words. My wife told me to listen. The judge nodded. The gavel came down. On a cold Saturday morning in January, I drove to Restwood Cemetery and knelt at Annette's headstone. The ground was frozen. My knees ached. I didn't care. I placed white roses against the stone, the same kind she'd carried at our wedding 34 years ago, in a chapel not so different from the one where Garrett's career ended. "That dog didn't hunt, Annette," I said softly, "and this time it didn't run either." The wind moved through the bare oaks above me, and for a moment, just a moment, I swear I felt her tap the side of my nose. After the trial, Celia did what Caldwell women have always done. She got back to work. She enrolled in a business management program at Mercer University while spending mornings at the lumber yard learning our supply chain from the ground up. She reorganized our inventory systems, she renegotiated 2 vendor contracts, and saved us 11% on quarterly costs. She was Annette with a spreadsheet and me with a handshake, and watching her walk through the warehouse, boots on, clipboard out, asking the right questions, was the closest thing to joy I'd felt since the diagnosis. The nightmares faded. Not all at once, in layers the way paint dries. Some mornings she'd call me at 6 a.m. and say nothing for a minute, and I'd just hold the phone and listen to her breathe. That was enough. Presence doesn't always need words. I'm learning to hear it, Dad, she told me one evening, sitting across from me at the kitchen table where Garrett had eaten 2 years of lies disguised as pot roast. That voice Mom had, the one that says something's off. I hear it now. Good, I said. Don't ever turn it down. A year and a half later, on an unremarkable Wednesday, Celia brought someone to dinner. No announcement, no fanfare, just a knock on the door and a man standing behind her with honest eyes and dirt under his fingernails. Dad, this is Leon Tate. He runs the urban agriculture program at the community college. Leon stepped forward and shook my hand. One hand, firm, brief, and genuine. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Jessup, he said. Celia tells me you built all of this from one store. That's something. I studied him the way I've studied 10,000 men across counters and conference tables. He didn't flinch. He didn't sell. He met my eyes and let the silence be comfortable. We ate. I asked questions, the kind that sound like small talk but aren't. Leon answered simply. He talked about his mother, a school teacher in Valdosta, his brother, who worked for the Forestry Service, his students, whom he described with the kind of pride that can't be manufactured. He didn't ask about the trust fund. He didn't mention Jessup Building Supplies revenue. He didn't hint at investment opportunities or suggest adding his name to anything. When Celia laughed at something, he said, a real laugh, unrehearsed, the kind that surprises the person making it. I saw the light come back to her eyes, the light Garrett had stolen. Later that night, after Leon had gone home and Celia was asleep in her old room, because Wednesday dinners sometimes turned into Wednesday sleepovers, I sat at my desk with Annette's photograph and a glass of bourbon I barely touched. The background check Dale had run on Leon sat in my drawer. Clean, stable, no debts, no aliases, no gaps in the story. Not because I was paranoid, because I was a father, and fathers who've been through what I've been through don't apologize for checking the foundation before they let someone walk through the door. I picked up Annette's photo and held it in the lamplight. I think this one's real, I said, and I swear on every board foot of lumber I've ever sold. The photograph seemed to smile. Because the deepest revenge isn't spectacle. It isn't a courtroom or a pair of handcuffs or a recording played through chapel speakers, although those things have their place. The deepest revenge is what happens after. It's your daughter standing taller than she stood before. It's watching her choose wisely with open eyes, armed with a wisdom that cost more than money can measure. It's hearing her laugh again and knowing, truly knowing, that the sound is real. I set the photo down and listened. Through the wall I could hear Celia's breathing, steady and peaceful. Down the road, a freight train moved through the Georgia dark, carrying weight to somewhere it was needed. I finished the bourbon, turned off the lamp, and let the house be quiet. If you're still with me, if this story stayed in your chest, I want to hear why. Have you ever had to protect someone you love, not with fists or fury, but with patience and preparation? Have you ever sat across from a liar and smiled, knowing the truth was already in the room, just waiting for its moment? Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. I read every single one. This has been the Otis Archive. We share stories like this because they matter. Stories about fathers who listen, about daughters who rise, about the quiet kind of strength that doesn't make noise, but never, ever breaks. Subscribe if you want to walk this road with us. There's always another chapter, one careful step at a time.